In August 1975, a wall of water 6 meters high swallowed entire cities in total darkness. No one saw it coming. And for the next 20 years, no one was allowed to speak of it. This is the story of the Banqiao Dam, the so-called Iron Dam that was supposed to last 1,000 years, but collapsed in just 5 days. The official death toll, 26,000. The real number, over 240,000 lives, erased in a single night. How could a miracle of engineering become a weapon of mass destruction? And why did the world never hear about it? The early 1950s were a time of grand ambitions in China. The Communist Party had just taken power, and Chairman Mao had a vision to transform China into an industrial superpower in record time. The Huai River was a wild beast. For centuries, it had flooded villages, destroyed crops, and claimed countless lives. And the Banqiao Dam, it was a cage built to tame it. Construction began in 1952. Thousands of workers, using primitive tools, moved millions of tons of earth and concrete. It was hailed as an iron dam, a symbol of man's ultimate victory over nature. Soviet engineers called it indestructible. The Chinese press celebrated it as a triumph. Propaganda posters showed farmers dancing in fields that would never flood again. But pride has a scent, and it smells like wet concrete and ignored warnings. A hydrologist named Qin Sheng raised concerns about the dam's sluice gates. 12 were requested. Only 5 were built. To save time, to save money. Qin Sheng warned that this design could not handle an extreme weather event. His warnings? Dismissed. He was labeled a right-wing opportunist and removed from project. It was a gamble against the odds of nature. The expert said a flood like this only happens once in 1,000 years. They didn't realize that the clock was already ticking. August 5th, 1975. Imagine standing on the edge of a massive reservoir and the sky turns the color of a bruised lung. Here's what most people don't understand. They think a dam failure happens because of a crack. But the truth is much more terrifying. Typhoon Nina didn't just bring rain. It brought a deluge that defied the laws of meteorology. Weather stations had never seen anything like it. The typhoon had traveled inland over 1,000 kilometers, and instead of weakening, it intensified. In 24 hours, a whole year's worth of water fell from the heavens, over 1,000 millimeters of rain in a single day. To put that in perspective, London gets about 600 millimeters in an entire year. The sound was deafening, a constant, heavy roar that vibrated in the chests of the workers. It was like standing next to 1,000 waterfalls all at once. You could smell the ozone and the thick, damp earth being washed away. The air felt heavy, difficult to breathe. Workers at the dam described the rain as solid walls of water falling from the sky. The Iron Dam was filling up, and there was nowhere for the water to go. By August 7th, the reservoir was rising at a rate of half a meter per hour. The dam operators could hear the structure beginning to strain. They had a choice: open the sluice gates and flood the villages downstream deliberately, or hold the water and pray the storm would pass. They chose to hold. By August 7th, the situation was desperate. The water level had surpassed the safety limit by over 3 meters. The workers at the dam sent an urgent message to the capital. Pause dramatic. The dam is at its breaking point. We must release the water. But the answer? Pause, suspenseful, never came. The storm had already claimed the telegraph lines. The radio frequencies were jammed by the typhoon's electromagnetic interference. They were isolated, alone in a sea of rising mud. The dam supervisor, a man named Wang Xingyi, made a desperate decision. He would send a messenger on foot to the nearest town, 20 kilometers away. But the roads, already underwater. Every minute was a struggle for breath. The rain was so thick, you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. The workers tied ropes around their waists just to move from building to building without being swept away. In the darkness, the iron dam began to groan, a sound of metal and rock, screaming under pressure. Some workers reported hearing cracking sounds deep within the concrete, like bones breaking beneath the earth. If the capital couldn't hear them, pause, quiet intensity. Who would save the millions living downstream? The answer was no one. 1 a.m., August 8th. Most of the valley was asleep. A thunderous crack split the night. The iron dam, dramatic pause, snapped. It didn't crumble. It didn't slowly erode. It exploded like a bomb. 600 million cubic meters of water released all at once. That's enough water to fill 240,000 Olympic swimming pools. It wasn't a flood. It was a tidal wave, a wall of water, 12 kilometers wide and up to 9 meters tall, moving at 50 kilometers per hour. Imagine a 3-story building made entirely of water race into the countryside faster than a car on a highway. It didn't just flood houses, it erased them. Concrete turned to dust. Trees uprooted like toothpicks. Entire villages vanished in seconds. Survivors described the sound as something otherworldly, not just a roar of water, but the screaming of metal, wood, and stone being ripped apart all at once. One survivor, a farmer named Li Wei, was sleeping in his home when he heard what he described as the earth tearing itself in half. By the time he reached his door, the water was already at his chest. He grabbed his daughter, climbed to the roof, and watched as his neighbors' homes simply disappeared in the silence of the night. The only thing louder than the water was the sudden pause, whisper-like, chilling absence of human life, but the horror was just beginning. Here's the question nobody asked. What happens when 62 dams fall in a single night? As a massive wave from Banqiao rushed down the valley, it hit the Shimantan Dam 20 kilometers downstream. Shimantan, built to the same specifications with the same design flaws, lasted less than an hour, then another and another. One by one, they failed. Like a row of dominoes, the province of Hunan became an inland sea, an area the size of New Jersey underwater. Over 11 million people were affected. Entire cities like Zamadian were submerged under 5 meters of toxic floodwater. Survivors described the smell of the aftermath, a mix of stagnant water, mud, decaying livestock, and the metallic tang of death. Thousands were stranded on rooftops, clinging to trees, watching as the world they knew disappeared beneath the brown, swirling abyss. One survivor recalled seeing a train completely submerged with only the top of a single car visible above the water. Everyone inside had drowned. For those who survived the wave, a slower, more painful enemy was waiting. The water didn't recede. For weeks, stagnant pools became breeding grounds for disease. Typhoid, dysentery, cholera swept through the survivors. And with all the roads and bridges destroyed, rescue efforts were almost impossible. Famine, disease, exposure. The water had brought death, and now it brought starvation. The province of Hunan was China's breadbasket, but the floods had destroyed the entire harvest. Over 140,000 people died, not from drowning, but from the chaos that followed. Relief supplies couldn't reach the survivors. Helicopters were grounded by the weather. The army struggled to the mud, but it was too late. For thousands, why was the world silent? Because the disaster was classified, a state secret. The Chinese government hid the numbers, they hid the stories. Foreign journalists were banned from the region. Even Chinese citizens, living just a few hundred kilometers away, heard nothing on the radio or in the newspapers. For 20 years, the families of the victims lived in a void, unable to mourn, unable to ask why. The official story? A natural disaster affected some areas, but the people's government responded swiftly. The real story? Buried under tons of mud and political embarrassment. How do you bury 240,000 people and keep it a secret? The answer lies in the mud of the Huai River and in the pages of classified documents that were finally released in 2005, 30 years after the disaster. Today, a new dam stands at Banqiao. It is stronger, safer, or so they say. The sluice gates have been increased to 33. Modern monitoring systems track every millimeter of water in real time. But the lessons of 1975 remain etched in the landscape. In 2005, Discovery Channel ranked the Banqiao Dam failure as the #1 technological catastrophe of the 20th century, ahead of Chernobyl, ahead of Bhopal. Yet, most people have never heard of it. Industrial accidents are rarely just accidents. They're the result of human ego meeting the unstoppable force of the earth, of ignored warnings met with political pressure, of cost-cutting met with nature's fury. The Iron Dam fell, but the memory of those who were lost is finally beginning to surface. Next time you see a monument of engineering, pause, reflective, ask yourself, what is it hiding? And who paid the real price for its construction? Because behind every dam, every nuclear plant, every industrial complex, there are warnings that were ignored, engineers who were silenced, and communities who paid with their lives. The question is, are we listening now